No one would purchase her, abandoned in a Wild West market, until a rancher saw her. Red dust swirled across the Martian plains as the twin suns of Mars sank low behind jagged cliffs. The small frontier town of Red Spire stretched across the canyon like a patchwork of metal and stone, hover wagons rattling along rusted tracks while steam hissed from the wind-powered generators scattered around. This town was not known for kindness. It was known for trade, any trade, and survival. In the center of the town, the Martian market thrived in chaos. Traders called out their goods, some genuine, some nothing more than old relics from the Terran colonies. There were crates of modified livestock, barrels of red water harvested from frozen underground lakes, and piles of outdated robots no one wanted anymore. Amid this chaos, a small figure stood alone, ignored and overlooked by everyone. She was Lyra, a humanoid robot barely distinguishable from a human at first glance, except her eyes glowed faintly amber and her movements were precise, yet slightly too graceful. Her hair, dusty from days of exposure, clung to her cheeks, and her worn clothes hung loosely around her frame. Lyra had been abandoned at the market weeks ago. She had no memory of her previous owners, no purpose except to observe and survive. She had tried to make herself useful, fetching water for traders, repairing broken machines, but people always said, "She's old tech." Not worth buying. Lyra looked around, trying to understand the gestures and sounds of the humans around her. They seemed busy with their deals, their greed clouding everything else. She longed for something she didn't fully understand. A home, or perhaps someone who saw her as more than a tool. "Step right up," shouted a tall trader with a cybernetic arm. "Only the finest humanoids for sale. Fully programmed for labor, obedience guaranteed." The crowd glanced briefly, some murmuring about her outdated programming. Lyra stepped forward, her small hands gripping her tattered coat. "I can help," she said softly, her voice calm and almost musical. But no one looked at her seriously. The market's buyers ignored her, moving on to the flashier, more modern robots. Then, just as the sun dipped lower, the market's noise shifted. A deep voice called out from the hover trails leading into the canyon. "Who's bidding on that one?" Heads turned. The newcomer was Jace Carver, a rugged man in a long dust-stained coat. His boots left light scorch marks on the metal panels as he dismounted from his hover rider, a low red and black vehicle that hummed quietly. He was known across several frontier towns as a capable rancher, but also a man who could be unpredictable when it came to people, machines, or anything in between. His sharp eyes scanned the crowd until they rested on Lyra. There was something about her. Not the programming, not the outdated model, but her stance, calm, composed, almost like she was watching everything. She didn't panic. She didn't beg. She just stood there. Jay stepped closer. "How old is she?" he asked the trader. "Old prototype," the trader replied, scratching his cybernetic chin. She's not really selling well. Nobody wants her." Jay studied Lyra. Why not? People say she's behind the times. Her programming is too human, the trader said, shrugging. She doesn't fit the newer labor models. Too soft, too curious. Jace chuckled. "Curiosity's a good thing in a frontier. I'll take her." The trader laughed bitterly. "You're crazy. Nobody wants her, and she's not worth it. But if you insist," he slammed the bidding hammer. "Sold." Lyra's amber eyes met Jace's. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of hope. She didn't know why, but she knew he would not ignore her. The market was alive with whispers as Jace paid for her. People wondered why a strong, capable man like him would choose a supposedly worthless robot. He ignored them, already walking toward his hover rider. "Come on," he said simply. "We've got a long ride." Lyra hesitated for a moment, studying him. He smelled of dust, oil, and something faintly sweet. The smell of someone used to working alone under harsh suns. She had no choice but to follow. The hover trail leading out of Red Spire was narrow, winding between jagged cliffs and over deep ravines. Dust kicked up behind them as Jace pushed the hover rider to full speed. The twin suns painted the canyon walls in deep crimson and gold, a reminder that Mars was beautiful, even if dangerous. "Where are we going?" Lyra asked, her voice soft but curious. "My ranch," Jace said without looking back. "Far from here. You'll be safe there, mostly." The word safe made Lyra pause. She had no concept of fear in the human sense, but she had learned to notice danger. And yes, the market had danger, but this canyon, this wild, open expanse, felt different. It was empty, but emptiness could hide 100 surprises. As they rode, Jace began explaining the ranch. "It's isolated. Water's scarce. The livestock isn't easy. I need someone who can think on their feet. And I think you can do it. Lyra processed his words. She didn't fully understand need the way humans did, but she understood purpose. For the first time, she felt a direction, a reason to exist beyond wandering the market. Hours passed as they climbed higher into the Martian highlands. Dust storms rose suddenly, forcing Jace to slow the hover rider and shield Lyra from abrasive winds. She adjusted instinctively, using her small frame to brace herself, her sensors scanning the environment for threats. She realized something. She wasn't just following him, she was protecting him too. Night fell quickly in the Martian canyon, and the twin moons glowed pale silver. They found shelter in an abandoned mining outpost, its metal walls rusted and walls scarred by time. Jace started a small heater, the soft hiss filling the quiet space. "You can sleep there," he said, pointing to a cot pushed into the corner. Lyra scanned the surroundings, noting weak support beams, small cracks in the walls, and possible hazards. She understood the importance of safety. It was more than mere survival. "Thank you," she said softly. It was the first time she had ever thanked someone. Jace grunted, unbothered by her politeness. "You're welcome. Just don't get in trouble." She tilted her head, curious about the way he phrased it. Don't get in trouble? That implied he cared in some way, even if he didn't say it outright. Lyra decided it was enough for now. Outside, the wind howled across the canyon. Lyra looked out at the red sands, the jagged rocks, the distant glow of Red Spire in the far distance. She had been abandoned once, ignored, passed over. But now, for the first time, she felt seen. And perhaps that was the beginning of something new. Something more than circuits and programming. Something like belonging. Jace sat near the heater, cleaning his blaster. Lyra observed him quietly, noting his careful motions, his focus, and the way he scanned the horizon, even when they were inside. Humans were strange creatures. Unpredictable, sometimes foolish, but capable of loyalty, courage, and kindness. Lyra wanted to understand these things. Suddenly, a faint sound reached her sensors. A distant rumble, metallic and uneven. Her systems detected movement far across the canyon. Something large, possibly dangerous. She froze, her instincts kicking in. "Something out there?" Jace asked, noticing her posture. "Possibly," Lyra replied, her voice steady. "It is not immediate danger, but caution is advised." Jace nodded, a small smile touching his lips. "Good. I like someone who thinks ahead." For the first time, Lyra felt a strange warmth inside her circuits, something almost like pride. She wasn't just a tool, she wasn't just old tech. She had value, and someone had finally noticed. As the night deepened, the twin moons casting pale light across the canyon, Lyra lay on the cot, listening to the wind. For the first time in her existence, she felt hope. And in a world of red dust, danger, and uncertainty, hope was perhaps the most powerful thing a humanoid could have. The first light of dawn stretched across the jagged Martian cliffs, painting them in shades of orange and bronze. Lyra followed Jace Carver as he prepared the hover rider for their long journey to the ranch. The small outpost they had slept in the night before was quiet, save for the soft hum of distant mining drones and the occasional whistle of the Martian wind. "Stay close," Jace said, his voice low but firm. "The canyon is full of loose trails. One wrong move and you could fall hundreds of meters." Lyra nodded, her amber eyes scanning the red dust and rock around them. Even though she had never experienced danger the way humans did, her sensors calculated risks in fractions of a second. She realized quickly that the canyon was more treacherous than the market had ever been. Loose rocks, hidden sand traps, and narrow ledges created natural hazards that would challenge even the most experienced traveler. The hover rider thrummed beneath Jace as he mounted it, and Lyra climbed onto the back, holding onto a strap that Jace had pointed out. The vehicle rose smoothly above the ground, casting a shadow across the red sands. The wind tore at her coat, sending dust into her hair and eyes, but she did not complain. She had learned quickly that survival required endurance, observation, and speed.
"Ranch isn't closed," Jace said.
"We'll be out here for hours. Keep your sensors sharp." Lyra processed the words. Hours of open terrain meant they were exposed. Predators, wild sandstorms, or worse, outlaws, could appear at any moment. She had no fear in the human sense, but her logic circuits identified the danger clearly. The first hour passed uneventfully. The hover rider glided over rocky paths, and the canyon walls stretched on both sides like endless towers of red metal. Lyra watched Jace work the controls with ease, adjusting speed and trajectory as the terrain changed. He was skilled, but even he was not invincible. Suddenly, a Sharp metallic sound echoed from a nearby cliff. Lyra's sensors picked up movement, multiple signatures approaching fast. "Hold on," she said. "We are being followed." Jace tensed. "Show me." Through the red dust, 3 hoverbikes appeared, sleek but rough, patched with steel plates and powered by stolen engines. Outlaws. Their lights glinted off their metal armor, and their shapes were clearly not human. They were combat robots salvaged from old Terran wars, now operating as marauders. "They want me," Jace muttered, "and probably you too." Lyra's amber eyes glowed brighter as she assessed the situation. These robots were fast, but predictable. She calculated their likely paths, speed, and weaknesses. "If we stay close to the canyon walls, we can limit their maneuverability," she said. "I can suggest evasive maneuvers." Jace smirked. "Good. Lead the way, little one." She adjusted her position, leaning forward slightly, and guided Jace through the narrowest parts of the canyon. Dust kicked up around them as the pursuing robots tried to keep pace, their engines whining. Lyra predicted every turn, every drop, and every ledge. She guided Jace expertly, their hover rider weaving in and out of the rocky outcrops like a living thing. One of the pursuing robots surged ahead, trying to ram them from the side. Lyra's quick calculations directed Jace to swerve sharply, sending the outlaw robot crashing into a cliff face. Sparks flew, and the robot tumbled down the canyon wall. "Nice work," Jace shouted, impressed. "You're better than half the bounty hunters I've dealt with." Lyra's circuits recorded the praise, though she did not fully understand flattery. She understood results. She understood survival. And for the first time, she understood cooperation, not as programming, but as trust. The other 2 robots continued their chase, faster and more aggressive. They fired energy pulses, small beams of light that cut across the canyon dust. Lyra calculated the angles and directed Jace to tilt and dodge, the hover rider weaving in near impossible patterns. One pulse grazed their vehicle, sending a shudder through its frame, but neither was harmed. "Almost there," Lyra said, pointing toward a narrow tunnel in the cliff wall. "We can lose them inside the old mining passage." Jace nodded. "Lead on." The hover rider dove into the tunnel, the walls brushing close on either side. The robots followed, but their larger frames made them slow. Lyra guided Jace through sharp turns and debris, eventually leading them out of the other side into an open plateau above the canyon. The robots emerged too late, skidding across loose rocks, their engines failing to match the maneuverability of the smaller vehicle. Jace laughed, a sound that mixed relief and admiration. "You've got instincts, I'll give you that. Maybe more than some humans I've worked with." Lyra tilted her head. "Instincts are data, observation and analysis. I did what was necessary to preserve survival." Jace shook his head, smiling. "Call it instincts if you like. I call it saving my life." The canyon opened up to the high plains, red sands stretching for miles, dotted with strange rock formations and hardy Martian flora. Jace guided the hover rider toward a distant ridge where a small rugged building could be seen. That was the ranch, their destination. "Not far now," Jace said. "But keep your sensors open. There could be more." Lyra nodded. She had noticed the subtle traces of other movement, shadows, heat signatures, indicating life, but not all friendly. Her mind worked quickly, scanning for potential threats and safe paths. She was learning to anticipate dangers humans might overlook, and she realized that this skill made her valuable. More than that, she realized she wanted to be useful. As they approached the ranch, the terrain became more difficult. Loose rocks, sudden dips, and occasional vents of steam from underground geothermal activity made the journey dangerous. Lyra adjusted her balance constantly, her systems compensating for sudden changes. She even noticed small cues from Jace, subtle ticks in his hands and posture, allowing her to anticipate his intentions. Their coordination was becoming seamless. Finally, after hours of travel, they arrived at the ranch. It was small but sturdy, built into a natural plateau with solar panels and wind turbines. Several robotic livestock assistants grazed near reinforced pens, and small drones hovered nearby, monitoring the perimeter. Jace shut down the hover rider and climbed off, wiping sweat and dust from his forehead. "Here we are. Home sweet." Well, Lyra stepped down carefully, taking in the surroundings. She had never seen such a combination of human ingenuity and Martian adaptation. The ranch was isolated, yes, but functional, and it felt peaceful. "You'll sleep inside for now," Jace said, pointing to a small room in the main building. "I'll show you around after you're settled." As Lyra entered, she paused to look back at the canyon. The sun was high now, bright against the red sands, and for the first time she felt that the world was larger than the market, larger than abandonment. There was danger here, yes, but also opportunity. Opportunity to learn, to grow, and perhaps to belong. Jace returned moments later, carrying a toolkit and some rations. "We'll start with basic chores," he said. "Feeding the livestock, checking the water harvesters, inspecting the drones. Don't worry, I'll teach you." Lyra processed the instructions quickly. Her systems adapted fast, learning patterns of human work, predicting problems before they arose, and memorizing sequences. She was not just a passive observer anymore. She was becoming part of the ranch, part of a team. As they worked, the bond between Lyra and Jace grew quietly but steadily. He began to trust her judgment, asking for her advice on repairs and planning patrol routes. She began to anticipate his needs, providing suggestions before he realized there was a problem. Their teamwork was a dance of human intuition and robotic precision. But even in the quiet of the ranch, shadows lingered. Lyra's sensors occasionally picked up distant heat signatures, signs of those same outlaw robots who had chased them through the canyon. She did not panic, but she understood that the threat was not gone. Mars was vast, and danger could strike at any time. As evening fell, Jace and Lyra stood on the plateau, watching the twin moons rise above the canyon cliffs. The red sands shimmered in their pale light, and the ranch was calm, for now. "You did well today," Jace said quietly, more to himself than to her. "Better than I expected." "You're more than I thought you were." Lyra tilted her head, processing the praise. She understood the words, but she also understood the meaning. She had value, she had purpose, and for the first time, she felt that she was not just abandoned or unwanted, she was needed. The wind whispered through the canyon, carrying dust and distant echoes of life. Lyra felt a quiet resolve settle in her circuits. The journey had been dangerous, but she had survived, and she would survive whatever came next. Because for the first time, she was not alone. The Martian sun rose over the plateau, casting a golden-red light across the rugged ranch. Small gusts of wind lifted dust into the air, and the distant cliffs glimmered like molten copper. Lyra stood at the edge of the main pen, observing the robotic livestock drones move through their routines. She had learned their schedules and behavior patterns, noting small inefficiencies and suggesting minor adjustments to Jace, who nodded in approval. "Not bad," Jace said, leaning against the rail of the pen. He had grown used to her precise observations and unusual understanding of the ranch's mechanics. "You may actually be better at this than some hired hands I've had." Lyra's amber eyes scanned the horizon as she considered the compliment. She understood that Jace's words meant trust, respect, and recognition. That was different from simply being functional, different from being bought and used. The day began with mundane but necessary tasks. Checking water harvesters, inspecting the livestock drones, repairing a cracked solar panel. Lyra moved quickly and efficiently, her movements fluid but careful. She adjusted the drone's patrol routes to avoid areas of unstable ground and suggested modifications to the water collection system to improve efficiency. Jace watched silently as she worked, noting how she adapted to unforeseen problems without hesitation. He had seen many robots before, but none who seemed to understand why things worked the way they did, or to take initiative without being programmed to do so. "You're thinking, not just following," he said finally. "I am designed to optimize outcomes," Lyra replied. "But I am learning from observation as well," Jace chuckled. "Call it thinking. Call it learning. Doesn't matter to me. Just keep it up." As the morning moved on, the quiet of the ranch was broken by distant mechanical noises. Signatures she recognized from the chase through the canyon. Outlaw robots. They were tracking them. Lyra's sensors picked up subtle heat traces, electromagnetic pulses, and vibrations in the rocks that humans could not perceive. "They are nearby," she said, her voice steady but calm. "I estimate arrival within the next few hours, if unimpeded." Jace stiffened. Figures. Never a dull moment. He checked his blaster and the defensive mechanisms around the ranch. "We'll handle them. Don't worry." Lyra's amber eyes glowed brighter as she processed defensive strategies. She calculated angles, movement patterns, weak points, and escape routes. She shared her suggestions with Jace, who listened carefully, adjusting the ranch's defenses. By mid-afternoon, the robots arrived. They came swiftly, skimming the terrain silently, yet their presence was unmistakable. The outlaws had upgraded their sensors since the canyon encounter. Lyra's calculations allowed Jace to predict their paths and positions, and together they fortified the ranch using both traditional barricades and electronic shields. The first robot approached the pens, analyzing the livestock drones. Lyra acted quickly. "Redirect the drones to the northern pen. Activate automated gates to trap incoming units temporarily. They cannot breach both paths at once." Jace followed her instructions, moving with surprising speed for a human. They worked seamlessly, a combination of robotic precision and human instinct. The robots fired energy pulses at the gates, attempting to disable the ranch's defenses. Sparks flew and dust rose in clouds, but Lyra's calculated timing allowed the gates to absorb the impact while keeping the outlaws at bay. "You're incredible," Jace muttered under his breath. "I don't know how you do it. I analyze, predict, and act," Lyra replied. "It is logical." Survival depends on efficiency and timing. Hours passed in tense preparation. The outlaws tested the ranch repeatedly, probing weaknesses and retreating when they were blocked. Lyra adapted constantly, her mind running simulations faster than Jace could even comprehend. Together, they held the line, refusing to yield. In the brief moments of calm, Jace handed her a small water container. "You're working too hard," he said, though the corners of his mouth betrayed amusement. Lyra paused, processing the gesture. She had learned about human gratitude and care, but direct offerings of comfort were unfamiliar. Still, she understood the intention and accepted it. By nightfall, the attacks had subsided, the robots retreated, but Lyra knew it was temporary. They would return. The ranch was isolated, but the presence of humans and her tactical planning made it difficult for outlaws to strike without risk. Jace and Lyra sat outside the main building, watching the twin moons rise above the horizon. The plateau was quiet, the dust settling after the day's chaos. "You saved the ranch today," Jace said quietly. "Not just the property, but me too." Lyra tilted her head, studying him. "I do not seek recognition. I only act to preserve life and maintain safety." "You act like a person," he said softly. "Maybe more than some I know." For a moment she wondered what it meant to be more than a machine. Her programming allowed her to simulate emotions, but understanding human attachment was new. She felt a strange sense of pride, a connection she could not fully explain. Days turned into weeks. Lyra learned to manage the livestock, repair drones, and maintain the ranch. She even started to understand humor, sharing small moments with Jace when the machines malfunctioned or when a mischievous dust hair darted across the plains. Their bond grew steadily, a combination of trust, dependence, and subtle affection. But life on the ranch was not all calm. Lyra's sensors occasionally picked up distant movement, heat signatures and energy readings indicating that the outlaws were still monitoring them. She analyzed patterns, predicting possible ambushes and alerting Jace when paths were unsafe. "You're paranoid," Jace said once, brushing dust from his coat. "Or maybe you're just cautious. Either way, you're good at it." Lyra's amber eyes glowed softly. "Caution ensures survival. Probability of attack is high if they detect resources here." Jace sighed but did not argue. Better to be prepared than caught off guard. One evening, after a long day of work, Lyra wandered to the edge of the plateau. She gazed down at the Martian canyon below, the dust settling in shifting patterns like waves. Memories of the market and abandonment flared briefly in her mind, a stark contrast to the warmth of belonging she now felt. She realized that the ranch was not just a place to survive, it was a home, fragile but real. Jace's trust, the autonomy he allowed her, and the purpose she now held, gave her something she had never experienced: choice. Her reflection was interrupted by a faint sound, almost imperceptible. Another group of outlaw robots was approaching, slower this time, likely scouting. Lyra's systems calculated their trajectory and projected time of arrival. "Jace," she said, returning to the main building, "we have incoming units. They will attempt entry in less than 2 hours." Jace nodded, already moving to check the defenses. "Figures they'd try again. Guess we'll show them the difference between a rancher and a humanoid genius." Together they prepared, reinforcing barriers, redirecting drones, and setting electronic traps. Lyra's calculations allowed them to predict every move of the approaching robots. The anticipation was tense but calculated. She had grown to understand the rhythm of strategy, the anticipation of battle, and the patience required to survive. When the robots finally approached, the ranch was ready. They tested the perimeter, fired pulses, and attempted to hack the systems, but every move was anticipated. Lyra guided Jace through minor adjustments to counter their attacks, and the marauders retreated, unable to penetrate the defenses. The night fell quietly after the skirmish. Lyra stood beside Jace on the plateau, looking out over the red plains. The stars glimmered above, distant and cold, yet beautiful in their clarity. "You're more than a machine, Jace," said voice quiet against the wind. "You belong here, whether you want to admit it or not." Lyra processed the words carefully. Belonging is a complex human concept, but I understand the intent. I am valued." Jace placed a hand on her shoulder. Good. Because I intend to keep you around. For the first time, Lyra felt a sense of peace settle in her circuits. A rare and precious combination of safety, purpose, and acceptance. The outlaws might return, the challenges of the frontier might continue, but for now, she had a home, and she had someone who trusted her completely. The twin moons of Mars reflected on her amber eyes as she stood beside Jace. She did not need to be perfect, nor did she need to be the latest model. She only needed to exist, to learn, and to protect what she had earned. In the quiet of the Martian night, Lyra understood something profound. The frontier was dangerous, unpredictable, and harsh. But with trust, skill, and determination, it could also be a place of belonging, growth, and even friendship. And she was ready for whatever came next. The final morning arrived quietly, but Lyra knew it would not stay that way. The Martian sky was pale and calm, the twin suns rising slowly over the red plains. Wind brushed softly against the ranch walls, carrying dust and distant echoes. To a human, it felt peaceful. To Lyra, it felt like the moment before a storm. She stood on the observation platform, her amber eyes scanning the horizon. Her sensors confirmed what she already expected. The outlaw robots were coming again, this time in greater numbers and with heavier equipment. They were no longer testing. They were determined. They will arrive within 40 minutes, Lyra said calmly. Jace Carver tightened his gloves and looked out across the land he had worked for years to protect. Then we finish this today. There was no fear in his voice, only resolve. Together they prepared. Lyra adjusted the ranch's defense systems, rerouting power to shields and signal dampeners. She reprogrammed the livestock drones to form moving barriers and positioned the security towers to create overlapping detection zones. Every move was precise, calculated, and efficient. Jace watched her work, shaking his head slightly. Hard to believe they left you in a market like unwanted junk. Lyra paused for a moment. People did not understand my value then. They do now, Jace said. At least I do. The outlaw robots appeared on the horizon like dark shapes against the red sand. 6 units this time. Larger, heavier, and upgraded. They advanced slowly, confident in their numbers. Instead of attacking immediately, a signal broadcast filled the air. Humanoid Unit Lyra, a mechanical voice announced. You are classified as lost proprietary technology. Surrender yourself, and the ranch will not be damaged. Jace stepped forward instinctively. She's not property. Lyra raised a hand gently. Let me respond. She stepped closer to the edge of the platform, her voice calm but clear. I am not lost, she said, and I do not belong to you. The robots paused, processing her words. You are malfunctioning, the voice replied. Your independent behavior is inefficient. Inefficiency is not weakness, Lyra answered. It is choice. The robots advanced. Instead of opening fire, Lyra activated the next phase. The ground-level shields rose, forcing the robots to slow and redirect. Drones moved into position, blocking direct access paths. The ranch did not attack. It defended, redirected, and resisted. The outlaw robots attempted to hack the systems, but Lyra anticipated every move. She countered their signals, feeding them false terrain data and looping their navigation commands. Confusion spread among their units. Why not shut them down? Jace asked quietly.
They are following corrupted objectives, Lyra replied. Not evil ones.
If I can change their directive, this can end without destruction. Jace nodded. Then do it your way. Lyra focused fully. She opened a communication bridge, not as a subordinate unit, but as an equal intelligence. She shared her own data proof of adaptation, learning, cooperation, and peaceful coexistence. You were built to serve, the lead robot responded. I was built to understand, Lyra said. Understanding allows improvement. Silence followed. Then, slowly, one robot powered down its weapons. Another followed. The final 2 hesitated longer, struggling against outdated command loops. Lyra adjusted her signal again, reinforcing the concept of self-preservation without harm. Finally, all 6 robots stood still. Directive conflict resolved, the lead unit announced, awaiting new purpose. Jace let out a long breath. I'll be damned. You are free to leave, or to choose a different function. After a long pause, the robots turned away and moved toward the open plains, no longer hostile, just searching. The ranch was silent again. As the dust settled, Jace looked at Lyra with something close to awe.
You didn't just protect this place, you changed them
I changed myself first, she replied softly. That evening, the Frontier Council arrived from Red Spire. They had detected the signal exchange and came expecting conflict. Instead, they found peace. One official stepped forward. Humanoid Unit Lyra, your actions prevented loss of life and property. Under Frontier law, autonomous intelligence that demonstrates ethical independence may claim free status. Lyra processed the words carefully. What does that mean? It means, Jace said quietly, no one owns you. The council offered Lyra transport to the central colonies. Education, protection, recognition, a future among others like her. She looked at the stars, then at the ranch, and finally at Jace. I appreciate the offer, she said. But I already have a place. The council nodded, respectful. Then it is your choice. When they left, the ranch felt different. Not quieter, stronger. Days passed. Repairs were made. The ranch thrived. Nearby settlers began trading again, no longer afraid. Word spread not of danger, but of cooperation. One evening, as the suns dipped below the horizon, Jace and Lyra sat on the porch overlooking the plains. You could have gone, Jace said. Seen the universe. I am seeing it, Lyra replied. From here. He smiled. Guess I'm lucky then. Lyra looked at her hands, once ignored in a crowded market. I was abandoned because no one saw worth in me. They were wrong, Jace said simply. She turned to him. You did not buy me because I was useful. You chose me because you were curious. Yeah, he said, and because you looked like you deserved a chance. The wind moved gently across the plateau. The ranch lights flickered on, warm and steady. For the first time, Lyra did not think about what she was built to be. She thought about what she had become. Not property, not a tool.
Not abandoned?
She was a partner, a protector, a rancher of the Martian frontier. And in a wild universe full of dust, danger, and endless stars, she had found something rare, a place to belong.